This is Sienna, inviting you to join me tonight as we navigate through the seen and the unseen, explore external and internal realities, expose on-world and off-world agendas, discover a path to joy and freedom. Now, join me as we illuminate the Shadowland and reclaim our birthright as free and sovereign beings.
Okay, we are back. This is part 2 with David Griffith. I highly recommend to anybody who's just tuning in tonight to go into the archives and listen to part 1. We're going to pick it up right where we left off. David is a researcher and an author. In his website, he states, "My primary role for many, many lifetimes has been as an intelligence officer working for the light side. My primary function has been investigation and exposure of the Enslaver operations and methods, not only on this planet, but on others as well. One of my main projects for this lifetime has been the preparation of an intelligence briefing for the peoples of Earth. And part of that's on his website, part of it's in his book, Revelations, a briefing for the peoples of Earth that can be accessed at upwardvectorhubs.com. Welcome back to the show, David.
Hi, Sienna. Thank you.
We were right in the midst of something, and probably my implanting won't allow me to even vaguely remember it. But
I remember.
You were in the pizza getting targeted for a heart attack.
There you go. That was it.
And, yeah, so we're talking about how weaponry can give heart attacks. And I just want to say, a dear friend of mine, Galen, has just been targeted in this way, and we're about to do his memorial here in Ecuador tomorrow. And we send our prayers and our light to our fallen comrade, Galen. He was a 9/11 truther and very articulate about the agendas operating on this planet. And he had a horrific heart thrombosis, beautiful, young, vital man, and they took him out in like a day or two. Total zombie. If he had lived, he would have needed dialysis, double amputation, multiple blood clots. Horrific way to be taken out, I have to say. Anyway, excuse me. I'm grieving a bit for my fallen brother, David.
I understand.
You carry on, David.
Well, there was a lead up to this before they tried to heart attack me. I had, I think I should back up just a little bit. I think back in the mid-'90s is probably when I got back onto the military and intelligence radar again. I had been doing some remote viewing with a friend of mine on the moon and Mars. And we were exploring this one particular base up on the moon. It was an old mining operation, actually. So we had been doing some remote viewing on that, and I sort of put my attention up on Mars too, and immediately felt that it felt very dangerous to be around there, so I didn't stick around there. But sometime later, I happened to mention to a friend of mine over the telephone that I had been doing some remote viewing on the moon and Mars, and I think it was probably about 2 days later, I had a black unmarked Huey circling around my house. That was sort of the first clue that I had. Maybe I shouldn't have said that on the phone. But there was a guy sitting inside on the bench, and he was taking photographs. They were doing aerial surveillance in preparation for ground operations. And it was, a few days later that the ground operations began, and they started running psyops on me and so forth.
What is a psyops for those of us who aren't versed in this terminology?
Okay. PSYOP stands for psychological operation, and essentially what it boils down to is you're trying to use the target's own fear against them. You're trying to manipulate them into doing something or not doing something, but typically it involves fear. And what they were trying to do is trying to run intimidation things on me. I had a bunch of people following me, cars following me, wherever, lots of cars, 4 or 5 cars, and let's see, I had a couple of guys cutting me off, just I'm getting ready to go through an intersection. They just suddenly pulled right in front of me, and another car comes up right on my tail, so I'm pinned in. I can't move, and this was all like at night. But what I did is I just confronted them. I just looked right at them, and I knew exactly what they were doing. I knew who they were, what they were doing. And of course, having the background that I did, I knew exactly what was going on. So ultimately, it didn't really have the intended effect. They weren't creating. They were trying to get me to stop doing what I was doing by using fear. Well, I didn't. I just confronted them. Matter of fact, a couple of guys, I just walked right up to them and said, "Hi, how's it going?" What do you do in a situation like that? It's like the cover's blown, and they couldn't do anything. So that was about the end of the psyops. But they still continued with covert, little things for a while. But ultimately, I guess they got pissed off enough that, oh yeah, now I remember what it was. I shouldn't get into that though. I did something they were really unhappy about. Yeah, that, well, I remember. I had forgotten about that. Anyway.
Are you going to tell us?
Well, let's just say I affected the weather a little bit. We'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right.
They had been, Southern California had been getting slammed by these successive storms coming in off the Pacific. And, it was just like every few days there was a new storm coming in and we were getting slammed, just boom, 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 boom. But at one point I said, what the heck is going on here? This is, there's something funny going on here. And I got the perception this was all being done artificially. I don't know if it was hard-proof, whatever. But so I just decided, I sort of put my attention up there, and I said, well, let me see if I can just steer this off and just kind of shove it up north. And so, yeah, well, that apparently pissed somebody off royally because it was shortly after that they tried to heart attack me. But so the beginning was they put something in this pizza that I ordered, or in it, on it, I don't know, probably on it. It was probably the delivery guy had something with him.
Are you kind of moving a little bit? I don't know if you're moving your head back and forth off the microphone, but we're getting kind of mushy and clear. If you could just stabilize yourself right up against that mic, we may have a better chance of hearing you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I noticed that there was some substance that was in the pizza that was causing my heart to begin racing. That was the first real indication. And luckily, my awareness at that particular point was high enough that I could put my attention inside of my body and sort of scan around, and I perceived that there was something there that shouldn't be there. So I was able to neutralize the effects of it to a certain degree. A short time after that, I noticed psychotronics kicking in very strongly.
How did you notice that, David? How did you perceive a psychotronic?
Well, I guess two things. One was that I hear it. I mean, it's just to me, it's very obvious. I can hear when they're changing the frequency, when they turn on another unit. It's very perceivable to me. I mean, I hear it on the inside of my head. But the other thing was that I specifically felt it targeting my heart. There are very specific frequencies that they can use which will disrupt the normal functioning of very specific organs in the body. And of course, they do have not only is it a specific frequency, it's also a very specific wave form. But they got all of this programmed into their machines. So then I noticed that the electrical signal from my heart was being disrupted also. And now, fortunately, I was aware of this technique for heart attacking people, you know, from, I guess, probably my days back on Marquette. And so when I felt this, you know, I heard the frequency flying and I felt the electrical signal from my heart being disrupted, well, I knew exactly what was going on. So, again, I was able to counteract it to a certain degree, sort of override it and maintain, you know, maintain proper control and so forth. So
you're doing this with your awareness.
Yes.
You're able to shift it by making awareness that this is occurring. Okay.
Yeah.
Just so, you know, if this is happening to other of our listeners, they have an idea how to counter these things. That can be the difference between life and death.
Yeah. Ultimately, I suppose it boils down to agreement. You know, I knew what they were doing, and I was not going to go into agreement with it. I said, no, you're not going to do it. No, this is my body. You're not going to, you know, you're not going to kill it off. So I just disagreed too. So they still weren't getting the effect. You know, it was just causing a little bit of defibrillation, I guess. You know, just sort of a little bit of arrhythmia. That was about all they achieved out of all of that. So then, the third phase, then I perceived this incoming line from one of their psychic warriors. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats. Did you ever see that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I did too, and I was, that, in my opinion, that was a counterintelligence piece because it was taking something that is very real, but then turning it into a big joke. You know, the whole thing was,
right, exactly.
The whole thing was framed in a very humorous and whimsical manner and crazy sort of manner. But no, they very definitely do have psychic warriors, psychic assassins. So one of these guys got on my line, and of course I was immediately aware of him. I perceived his attention on me, and so I was looking right back at him.
Right, now you're breaking. Now we're losing you, and now you're hopping in and out here. So okay. I don't know if anything you can do to change that. But yeah.
Okay. So this guy, suddenly, there's this one of their psychic warriors, and he is trying to now reinforce the psychotronics. He's trying to shut down my heart too. So I had all three of these going simultaneously, and I think this is typically how they will get rid of people, you know, rather troublesome people. This is their method for heart attacking them. And of course it provides plausible deniability.
Right.
So luckily I was aware of all of these things. I was aware of this psychic warrior coming in trying to target my heart too, and so I just maintained control and I didn't go into agreement with it. And ultimately, after a while, they gave up. Yeah, they've tried quite a few times since then, but the most, I guess the most serious they got one time was I had, I don't know, 7 or 8 people simultaneously trying to shut down my heart simultaneously. Even some guys from off planet. There was a group of 4 guys off planet. There was a guy on a submarine. There was somebody in Russia. There was an Italian guy over in down in Indonesia. Yeah, it was rather concerted attack.
So they must think that your information is particularly dangerous to get out to the world. I certainly know as hard as it is to get this radio show happening. I mean, my God.
Yeah.
So,
well, that and they're just generally pissed off at me.
mm-hmm. Okay. Do you want to talk about Roswell before we go into the in-between live manipulation?
Okay.
I would like to dive into before all said and done there.
Sure.
Roswell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've also noticed that the sound seems to be getting kind of muddy also.
Not too bad right now, but
yeah, slight degradation, but not too bad. All right, so let me jump back to the larger view for a minute, and the fact that we've got this massive game that's going on here in this universe right now. And the game is essentially enslavers versus free beings. And it's been going on for a very, very long time. Well, there is a game plan that the enslavers have been following for a very long time. So being aware of this game plan and knowing what was coming ahead of time to a certain degree, I was able to be in certain places at a certain time in order to observe certain things and collect certain data. So Roswell was one of those key pivotal points in the game for events here on Earth. That was the sort of a key thing which sort of led us to exactly where we are now with this massive intelligence apparatus that's now, the military-industrial complex and this massive police state that's now getting built up. But Roswell was sort of that key pivotal thing that allowed all of this.
Why? How?
Okay. Well, because the government, U.S. government and other governments, suddenly had in their possession physical evidence that there were other cultures out there, extraterrestrial cultures, who had highly advanced technology compared to our own. And they got scared into, I believe what actually happened was they were maneuvered into signing an agreement with somebody. And I suspect Morcavian intelligence was heavily involved in that little operation. Now, I knew, well, okay, let me throw out a little bit of data. I don't know if you're aware of this. There was something called the National Security Act of 1947. Are you familiar with that?
Refresh your memory.
Okay. That particular item brought into being the Air Force as a separate entity. Before that, there was no Air Force. There was Army Air Forces, Marine had their Air Corps, Navy had their Air Corps, and so forth. So the National Security Act of 1947 created the Air Force as a separate entity. It also created the CIA, which is what sort of paved the way for where we are now. Before that, there was something called the OSS, Office of Strategic Services. But there was a whole series of things that happened as a result of that National Security Act being signed. Well, that thing was signed, I think, about 2.5 weeks after the Roswell incident. So I believe what happened was that after they got their hands on some of this technology, there were a series of high-level meetings that were held in D.C., and there were a whole bunch of things that came out as a result of that. So backing up now to the larger game, I knew ahead of time that sort of on an unconscious level, I guess you might say, that that certain things were getting ready to occur, and I managed to get myself into the a very unique position. Well, maybe I should go into a little bit of that. Back before the war started, 1941, I think it was the summer of 1941, I joined up, I was a pilot, and I joined up with this group called the AVG. It stands for American Volunteer Group. And it's a group of civilian pilots that volunteered to go overseas and fly combat missions against the Japanese who were spreading out in that area. So a bunch of pilots joined up, and I believe I did my flight training down in Long Beach, California, Southern California. And then after we completed our flight training, we flew over to Hawaii, and Hawaii across the Pacific, and so forth. And I believe I was flying over in Burma as a fighter pilot. So as we're flying missions over there, we began seeing these luminous orbs flying around, which many people are familiar with now. And some of the crews over there began calling them foo fighters. That's where that term came from. So on one of my missions, I had some interactions with some of these orbs. And I believe somebody, one of the other pilots, noticed that I seemed to be interacting with one of them. And so, of course, this got written up. And before long, a couple of intelligence officers showed up from DC, and they interviewed me. And a short time later, I was shipped back to the States and began my intelligence training back there, and eventually went into what was called the Psych Corps. And so I was involved in extraterrestrial hardware because they had managed to shoot down some of these orbs back then in the early 40s, years before Roswell. So they already had extraterrestrial hardware in their possession, years before Roswell. Yeah. And I was working at this, there was a highly classified underground facility south of Roswell in part of the Carlsbad Cavern network. So they had a bunch of these orbs down there, and they had built this secret facility down underground in part of the caverns.
Hello?
Yes?
All right, we're losing you a little. Okay, come on back. Yeah, lost that last sentence.
Okay.
And we have about 4 minutes till our first break, just so you know.
Okay. They had built this secret facility in part of the Carlsbad Caverns network. And they had some of these orbs down there where they had some of the orbs that they had managed to shoot down. So they were studying these things and trying to decipher the technology. They were trying to back engineer it. And this is in collaboration with Wright Pat, which is in Dayton, Ohio, Wright Patterson, the Foreign Technology Division. So I was there in this, I was being bussed in and out of there each day along with a group of other guys, technicians and so forth. But I was actually staying there at Roswell. So that's how I happened to be there at Roswell at the time of the Roswell incident. How much time do we have?
Oh, about a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Okay. All right. So most people that have studied Roswell are familiar with the basic timeline that Mac Brazel came into town, and then Jesse Marcel followed him back out there, and so forth. And this would have been, I think, around the 7th of July. But actually, there was a whole lot of things that went on before that. And for people that have studied all of this, they're probably aware that there were 3 separate locations listed for the crash. And there's a very good reason for that. So the Foster Ranch, which is where Mac Roswell was working, that was actually site number 3. Site number 2 was at just off of Pine Lodge Road, and there were a number of witnesses there at that location. And site number 1 was about 42 miles north of town, just off the side of Highway 285, and that's where I was. I was at site number 1. How much time?
Don't worry, it's about a minute and a half.
Okay. All right. So
actually, about 30 seconds till the music starts.
Okay.
And then we'll have another 27 minutes after the break. So,
okay.
I mean, you may just want to hold it there. This is incredible detail that you're having about this situation. And
well, there's a lot more.
Yes. Well, we can't possibly dive into all this, but at least we've introduced you. We're going to break now. We'll be right back for our second half with David Griffin. Stay with us if you dare. Welcome back, everyone. I am here in this last half hour with David Griffin. His website is upwardvectorpubs.com. He has an incredible book. Mine is coming in the mail, and I can't wait to dive into it. This is a vast amount of material that's breaking through with this man. And I'm hoping at some point to interface with some kind of workshops or programs, although that's currently being discussed. So stay with us. We were discussing Roswell. Where do we need to take this now, David?
Okay. So let's see. I was just talking about I was at site number 1. Site number 1 was located approximately 42 miles north of town, the town of Roswell. And I went there to site number 1 with a recovery team just a short time after midnight on the 5th. So we worked all through the night getting everything loaded up onto a large flatbed truck and collected up into jeeps and so forth. And there was a couple of guys that were still alive when we got there. Several were dead. There was one who was very badly wounded. He was close to death. And then there was another guy that was up walking around who looked to be heavily in shock.
Were these grays? Their bodies look like typical grays?
No, they were not the typical what I call the nasty grays. They were smaller humanoids. They had humanoid, regular humanoid bodies. They were smaller. Their heads were a little bit larger, but they were not the ugly grays that most people are familiar with. So when I got there, I went up to the one that was laying there dying, and sorry, I just got some bit of emotion.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine, David. You don't have to suppress that here. Yeah, that must have been an incredible experience, didn't it?
Yeah. So he you know, he was, well, all of them were very surprised. They didn't know how this could have possibly happened. You know, it took a little while to get it, but essentially what happened was they were shot down. Now, see, here's the weird part, though. Our military did not have the technology to do that. See, that's where the confusion came in, because they knew this. They knew what our the technical capabilities of our military were at that time. So they were.
Who shot them down?
Exactly. That's, yeah. See, now we're getting to the real cover-up. Yep. Well, not only them, but see, now you've got 2 other crash sites with 2 other craft. And see, this has been one of the big secrets that counterintelligence has been keeping all this time. They've been focusing all attention on Mac Brazel and the Foster Ranch. See, well, that was site number 3. And so, well, for example, I noticed there's a couple of guys that are pretty well known in this field, Randall and Schmidt, Kevin Randall and Don Schmidt. They wrote a series of books about the Roswell craft. One of the things that I noticed is that, you know, the typical scenario is that there was just a single craft and maybe it got struck by lightning. Nobody really knows why it crashed and so forth. And so everybody's been trying to fit all these various pieces to fit a single location. Well, they don't fit because there was 3.
Okay.
And the other thing is that one of the key witnesses in the story is I think his name was Glenn Dennis. He was the mortician in town in Roswell, and he was contacted by the base. They asked him if he had any child-sized caskets. Well, in his original, I believe it's his original affidavit, written affidavit, he stated the date when the base called him to ask about preserving bodies. How could they preserve bodies that have been laying out in the desert and so forth, out in the elements? And did he have any child-sized caskets and all this? So in his original affidavit, he states that when they first contacted him was before Marcel had even been out to the Foster Ranch. And of course, many people say, "Oh, well, look, he's wrong. It couldn't possibly be." Well, no, he's not wrong. He was quite correct, because there were 3 completely separate sites, 3 completely separate recovery operations, 3 completely separate recovery teams, etc. So the team I was with, we got back to base early in the morning of the 5th and got everything stored in the big hangar. And I recall just hitting, I think I grabbed some food and then hit the south. I've been up all night, so I got some sleep. And then later that night, I met with a group of people inside the hangar, and they had pulled out there was a round navigational array that they had pulled out of the craft. And they were all looking at this on a table, and so I was doing my thing of sort of mental probing, I guess you might say, using my perceptions. And so I said, okay, well, here's what this is, and here's what this part of it does, and here's what this part does, and so forth. And to a rather astonished group. And so then the next day, I was shipped out, along with that navigational array, I was shipped from Roswell to Muroc, which is now known as Edwards Air Force Base. So what happened is that there was this massive rush to get everything out of there. Not only the hardware was dispersed very, very rapidly to lots of different locations. I went out to Muroc. A bunch of it went up to Lake Pat. I'm sure some of it went back to D.C. because there were I'm sure that there were some high-level meetings that were held shortly afterwards. So all of the hardware was dispersed very quickly, but also all of the personnel. They were all transferred very quickly to other locations because they had a second recovery operation going on at Pine Log Road. So then all of that hardware came back in, and they did the same thing again. Everything was dispersed very quickly. All the personnel were gotten out of there, and they thought that everything was under control. And then all of a sudden, Mac Roswell comes strolling into town, going, "Hey, I got this thing on my ranch. Somebody want to come out and take a look at it?" And they suddenly found out, "Oh my God, we've got 3." And so then, then there's another massive operation. Now, what happened after that then was that there was this massive counterintelligence operation to cover this whole thing up. And of course, the intention to cover this up is not only coming from our own governmental level, it's also coming from the level above who is responsible for the shoot down. So you can see that the government, our government's been following orders. They were told to shut up and don't say anything about this because there was a much bigger secret there, because somebody shot down the surveillance, the observation craft. And these observation craft were here for the specific purpose of monitoring the buildup of atomic weapons. And there's a reason for that also, which I won't get into now, but it has to do with events that have happened here on this planet in the distant past.
Well, it sounds like you can go way down this rabbit hole. Yes. In the remaining time we have, if you feel we can leave that there, certainly have shown us the kind of detail that you have access to, and that's incredible. I would like to dive into the in-between death manipulations.
Okay.
What you're aware of, what you remember, what you've seen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. First of all, there's a number of things on the website already, and there are two articles specifically about the Between Lives implanting operation. There's also bits and pieces and various other articles there on the website too. So, as a matter of fact, there's one that sort of involves Roswell and the Between Lives operation. It's in section 3. It's called Past Life Memories 2. So that will give you a lot of data also. But when and I should also say it's taken me a heck of a lot of work to be able to even begin accessing this area. I mean, this area is so deeply buried, so highly charged. I had to work on so many other areas before I could even begin to get into this area. So, now in one of those articles, I think it's the second one, Between Lives Implanting 2, I've got some illustrations in there that were drawn by a woman, Betty Andresen Luca, I think was. I'm not sure what her name is now. I think she might have remarried. But she did some really good illustrations. There's a number of very, very good illustrations in that book. And at the time, she recalled being taken to some location. She didn't know where it was, and she didn't know what the purpose was. But I picked up that book back in the early 90s, and as soon as I saw that picture, I knew immediately. I said, "Oh my God, look at this! And we've got a picture of an implant station." And so I bought the book, and it's been in my library all this time.
It's an implant station?
Well,
what are you talking about, David?
Okay. Let me. The Between Lives facility is an implant station. An implant station is just a generic term for a location where people are taken to be implanted. Okay. The one that I'm talking about is a very specialized implant station. It is the main Between Lives facility for Earth, and it's located up on Mars. It's actually underground. The whole facility is underground. It's been there for an incredibly long period of time. And as a matter of fact, I was investigating, when I was investigating a very, very long time ago, I was actually there investigating that facility when it was under construction.
Does everyone go there?
Not
everyone go there?
Not everyone. There are other implant facilities elsewhere, but that's sort of the main one. I think a large percentage of people go through that one, but there are also other facilities as well. That's the one that I'm familiar with, but I do know that there are other facilities besides that one.
So does everybody go to one of these things on different places or not? Or, I mean, do you get to say no?
That depends upon the person.
Yeah.
We have, most people, as a part of this recycling program, most people have been programmed to report back in after their death. You know, after they die, you know, suddenly find themselves looking down at their body.
But we've heard that there are different bardos, that the Christians go one place, that they holographically or however they do it, implant you with the notion that you're there before Jehovah, if that's what you believe, you know, that, or that you're having your life review, or your, you know, that there are things that people, that their family members approach them, that all of these things that we've been hearing for so long, that this is beautiful state that you enter, is all that part of the implantation process?
Oh, you know, it could be that there are other operations running that are not even in this universe. That's a possibility also. I mean, there are other universes. And I will also say at this point that I still have a lot of work to do in uncovering this area. So I don't want to try and make a blanket statement that, you know, that I'm not certain of at this point.
Okay.
So I'll try and leave that one alone for now and just stick with what I am certain of.
Okay.
So there's this big facility up there on Mars, and people have been, as a general rule, programmed to report back in after each death. And so they just report back in automatically. Now, whether a person does, of course, would depend on a number of different things. Maybe, you know, for example, I was supposed to report back in again, but I can tell you right now, I'll be going into it anyway, except maybe just to see what's going on. But I mean, I won't be reporting back in. I mean, that's I'm out of their control at this point because I'm completely aware of the operation. I've discharged a whole bunch of that stuff. So I'm out of their control as far as that goes.
I'm sorry, I lost you there. Not sound-wise, but it just, what are you saying there?
Well, because at this point, I've uncovered this area, you know, for myself. I remember being there. I've discharged a lot of this implanting, so I myself won't be reporting back in anymore.
So you're saying that it is possible for those of us that are in that to uncover it through discharging the energy that's tied in with the implanting, and we can be sovereign, and we don't have to buy into this script, and you've already done it. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and that's one of the reasons that I'm talking about this area and bringing it out into the public so that people will know about it. And so if somebody is aware of this ahead of time, then chances are good that they won't go back through it either. So that's why I'm making all of this information available. To try and stop this.
I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, this is one of the major things.
Major operation for controlling the populace here on this planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that, I mean, I've heard in so many metaphysical circles that, oh, the veil is just there to protect us, you know, the veil of where we can't remember anything. And, oh, it's thinning though now, and, you know, like, and that we all just accept it, right? Oh, well, death is an organic part of the cycle and you have to die and stop resisting it. And you know, we all think it's going to be this glorious thing, you know. But
right.
the very same enslavers are on the other side implanting us, knocking out our memory and putting us where they want us back there. I mean,
exactly.
this is not cool.
Now you've got it.
Words.
Yeah. Now you've got it. That's the essence of the operation right there. And part of the operations to keep all of this hidden are what I call the love and light, the enslaver love and light operations, who tell us it's all sweetness and light and so forth, and tell us all these happy sounding lies to keep the
there's a divine
truth.
plan, and you've been put into your family because those are all the lessons you need. You all, well, we have to agree somewhere along the line that we contracted to all of this, but it seems a little bit out of control.
The funny part is that part of that is true. It's not completely false. Part of it is true. Part of it is we do need to learn certain lessons, but they're taking advantage of it in order to keep us under control.
Right.
So, so it's partly them, it's partly us. We're also responsible to a certain degree.
Well, it seems to be the time when humanity, or a portion of humanity, has the possibility to wake up to these enslaver programs and say no. You've done it several times. Sounds like you've done it a lot of times.
Yeah, I'm just an ornery sort. I disagree a lot.
So, you know, we only have a short time left. I feel that you have a great deal of wisdom to give to people. I understand that you're very sensitive to dosing it out in portions that we can tolerate. I also know that you've been heavily blocked from getting this information out. I would like you to give us an idea of people whose appetites you've whetted, who want to dive deeper in with you. What do they do? Where do they go? I'm certainly hoping to have you on here again. I'm hoping to have you somewhere where we can start discharging and gaining these memories back and learning these techniques. But what would you recommend as a next step for our listeners?
Well, first of all, there's an awful lot of data in the book, which I have not even touched on here in the show. So I suppose the first thing would be get a copy of the book and read the data that's in there, because then it'll give you a much, much larger viewpoint on where all of this stuff fits in a much larger picture, which goes back to about 80 billion years ago. Where all of this.
Tell them where to find us again. Upward.
Upwardvectorhubs.com.
And there's also, we don't want to confuse them with the other. There's another David Griffin that's a UFO expert supposedly, and he's got a thick Scottish accent. That is not you, correct?
Correct. Yeah. As a matter of fact, he's been interviewed and promoted by Kerry Cassidy, and I am not connected to Kerry Cassidy in any way.
Okay, so don't get confused. Yeah, if people Google you and they start pulling up David Griffin, they're going to run into that guy.
So probably the best thing is just go Upward Vector Publishing.
That's Upward Vector Hubs Publishing. Yeah, to get to David Griffin. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that would be,
book.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of data in the book, and I think once you get your copy, you'll go, oh my God,
right.
We need to talk about this.
Yes.
So there's a whole nother aspect. It's sort of like a whole nother level to this operation that you'll begin seeing at that point.
Well, I have already invited David on to Rise Multiversity. He says that it's not private enough. We may have to get a physical location sponsored by Rise Multiversity someplace. I don't know where.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Things are sort of fluctuating and up in the air right now.
Yeah, because I'm seeing people really diving into your book, accessing your information, and starting to do some of this discharging and clearing with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know the particulars.
One other thing, if I could throw out, at this point, I've been under, as you are starting to see, but I've been under some very, very heavy suppression for quite a while, and at this point, I need some help of others too. But I'm getting a lot of counterintelligence operations and phony help, but I need some real help.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What kind of help do you need, David?
Well, let's see. One of the things right now is my finances have been hit very, very heavily. So if anybody out there likes what I'm doing and would like to help to support the mission, that would be greatly appreciated. Because I need some help of a group of people to take this to a much, much larger and wider scale. You know, I've been operating as a single individual all this time, but we need to expand this. So,
yes, I completely agree. I have very rarely gone up against a field that has got this much counter force coming at it, which makes me realize, wow, this guy must really be the real deal. And I know we didn't go into all this info around the space program and the UFO phenomena, all of this. There's so much redirection and disinfo out there that when we encounter the real deal, it's very, very suppressed. And that's how it is. Doesn't mean we can't transcend and overcome. And I would suggest people start by getting your book at the very least.
Yeah, because there's, excuse me, there's a whole bunch of data in there that gives you a view of this from a much higher level. So.
And that, yeah, because we're looking so much here on Truth Frequency at all of the enslavement agendas which are coming out of the woodwork like cockroaches in every direction. And if we are foolish enough to think that this is just on world or in this dimension, it's not being orchestrated very multidimensionally, then we're not going to be sensitive enough to really break our chains because we're not going to be aware of how we're being impacted. It's not that we get paranoid or we get on some kind of a trauma drama and we're the victims and, oh, I'm targeted, or, you know, that we get on the pity pot and we dive into these stories like so many of us do, and we can all have a tendency to, but that we look it all straight in the face and we unmask all of it so we even know how to go, like you did and you have many times go, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting a heart attack today. I'm not, whatever it is. All right, we're out of time here, David. Thank you so much for everything you've done for all of us, for who you are. And I strongly encourage you to dive into this man's work. And hopefully we'll have him back on the show. Take care, stay alert, stay willing, become free.